consistency as opposed to intensity and burnout. Because that's kind of how I've always worked. I have like I get very into it and I go really hard and then I burn out and then it takes a while to recover and then so I've learned now to be much more.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pulse of Tech podcasts, where we have insightful conversations about building digital products, brands, and teams, as well as explore the challenges of the tech industry. Once again, this is Lady Adeniyi. I'm your host, and I'm super excited that you're here listening to me speak. This is the second episode, and on today's episode, we have a special guest joining us. His name is Kola Ojo, an amazing product designer whom I've worked with a lot of times actually. I once stole him from a company one time, but I'm not I'm not going to mention names. Anyways, we'll be diving into the fascinating topic of how he would learn product design over again, and we would be exploring insights and all the wisdom Kola has gained throughout his career. We'll be discussing valuable lessons he has learned, challenges he has faced, and strategies Kola would employ if he had the opportunity to start all over again. So, Kola, thank you for joining us today. Excited
Yeah,
to have you here.
thanks for having me, man. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So,
Appreciate.
could you start by sharing a bit about your background and how you got into this field of product design?
Yeah, definitely. I I like to say I've always been a designer, but that's probably because I've always like drawn on paint and all that. Um, but I didn't start doing anything like serious digital design until when I was in uni. And so while I was in uni, I discovered Autodesk Maya in year one. And so just went fully into it, like wanted to be like Disney, designing 3D models. And then while designing models, I discovered Photoshop. And then I fell in love with that and then pivoted completely into visual design, doing like banners and branding and photo retouching. As I freelanced that for about 3 years. And then one day I was in class and I just heard a friend say design thinking. I had never heard it before. I think this was in final year. And yeah, I just went to look it up and then I was like, oh my God, it was very interesting. So that was when I said, okay, no, I'm not doing engineering, I'm not doing graphics design. I want to do product design. So that's around I think 2018 or 2019. Um and yeah, I've been in it since then. So
Oh, nice, nice. I mean, design thinking is one of the enlightenment points of most designers' careers. You
mm,
just realize that you can go through this journey in like a beautiful way. It's not just about putting pixels on the screen as most
yeah,
of us thought it was when we
yeah.
were in like secondary school or just entering into university. That makes sense. Can you talk a bit about like how you've progressed in that journey and some of the challenges you've faced along the way?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think one thing that really helped was because I had a visual design background. So because I had been graphics designer for a while, I already understood color, already understood type, already kind of understood layout and how to use all these things to communicate. And so when I was coming into um, product design, I was bringing all those skills with me. So that was one thing that I think was really helpful. Um, I think just also another thing that I know I did very early on that helped was or two things I did very early on. One was I took a course. So because there's a route where you can go, and then you're doing YouTube, you're doing Medium, you're just reading scattered articles all over the place. And the problem with that is that you have very fragmented knowledge. So you know some things, you don't know some things, you don't know what should come before what. So I think that's one thing I did that was really helpful. I immediately I knew this was something I might be interested in. I went to take a course with IDF, took a couple of courses with IDF. And so that kind of gave me some structure. Um,
Okay,
yeah.
for those of the people that don't know, can you tell us what IDF is?
Okay, so IDF is Interaction Design Foundation. It's based in Denmark, and it's they have very like detailed courses, so it almost feels like a university degree because every single course has like a lot of like reading assignments and take home and tests, and so it's very detailed learning.
Okay, then
Yeah.
that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so you mentioned all these essential skills that you've built along the years, like visual design, typography. In your personal opinion, what are some of the essential skills and knowledge areas that you believe the young or aspiring product designers should focus on?
Yeah, so I think it's those ones. For every young designer I have spoken to or helped mentor, I always start them out learning about the fundamentals of design. So type, color, layout, so everything around gets out. Um, because those all visual elements are made of those things. There will always be type, there will always be color, and it always needs to be laid out in a way that makes sense. So that's usually where I advise people to start. And then as a balance to that, because most product designers in Nigeria don't get to do just UI or UX, you have to do everything together. So as a balance to that, I also just tell them to learn design thinking and then to start understanding the basics of research. So I think because junior roles are much more execution, and so you need to be able to do your
Yeah.
research, you need to be able to kind of think, even if it's very early, just think through a bit some flows, and then you need to be able to design screens. And so yeah, I think if you know the fundamentals of design and you know the basics of design thinking, I think that's always a good starting point.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that would be useful for a lot of people. Um, so are there any specific learning resources? I know you mentioned IDF, that's Interaction Design Foundation. Aside from that, are there any other learning resources that you would recommend for someone that's starting out, or specifically within IDF? Are there any courses that you found very valuable and you would like to touch upon?
Yeah, so within IDF, I guess a good place to start is they have well, they used to have a course. I don't know whether they still have it. They used to have a course in 2019 that was called um, Becoming a UX Designer from Scratch. And the course was essentially what it sounds like. It was, they were teaching you all the basics. They were teaching you this is what product design is, this is what design thinking is, um, and this is everything you need to do. These are all the steps. So that's probably one that is that I highly recommend. There's also this one from Product School. Product School also did like a free course. That one is, well, it's quite long, but it's also like really helpful. and it's like I think 10 hours or so. But it also just covers every single thing that you kind of need to start out and have a working understanding of UX design. Um, I think a third one, and this isn't a course, it's just like a place to get a lot of resources, would be NNG, so Nielsen Norman Group. Um, yeah, because there's
Okay.
multiple articles and videos and writings on almost anything that you come across in while taking a course. So what I usually recommend is take a course so you have structure, and then use like use your normal group if you want to do like extra reading, or use like Figma if you want to learn more on the UI side, like Figma's YouTube um, channel, or use like AJ and Smart if you want to have something like News Normal Group but have like it in a more fun, visual manner. So
So agent smarts, can you talk a bit about that? I don't think you really went deep enough into it. They're
yeah,
like
so
a design agency, right?
yes, so they are a design agency, but we focus more on um, product strategy and specifically design sprints. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Sprint by Jake Knapp. So
Yeah, I read it.
he and he's a partner at AJ and Smart, and so that's essentially what they're doing. They're taking all the learnings that they used to write the Sprint book, and they are consulting for a lot of very big companies. But on the side, they've also set up a YouTube channel that's like almost purely educational, and it's very fun. It's a nice resource to check out.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So let's move on to another question.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
So onto like portfolio building. Can you suggest some effective strategies or the strategies that you've used to build a stronger portfolio that has landed you jobs?
Yeah. So it has varied over the years. I think when I first applied for jobs, because UX was very young, um, and also there were much more jobs in the market. I got away with having a my first portfolio was a Google Drive link, and so it had all my UX like screenshots from my UX design in one folder, had branding stuff on another folder, and it had graphics design like campaigns and banners on another folder. And so that was then. After a while, it was on Notion, and then now I'm trying to build out a better one on Framer. So it has varied over the years, but I think one thing that someone told me that has always helped is that it's a working document. It will always be a working document. So the major things you want to do is show your work and show your work, show your process, and then um, just let the person know that you've done it before, either you've done it before or you can do it. So what do I mean? If you're going for a more visual role, you want to show much more like visual stuff. Um, and you want to show like really good visual stuff, because if you want to position yourself as a visual UI designer, then your UI designs have to be pretty good. Um, if you're going for a
Mm,
more senior role, um, then you want a balance between um, purely just UI designs and some designs that kind of speak to your process. Because the more senior you go, um, the more it's expected that you kind of have a process and you can go beyond just execution to think about the larger system. Another thing I usually advise is to have multiple kinds of products. So maybe do something about a website, then design a web app, then design a mobile app, just so the recruiter knows that okay, this person has range. Um, if I had to pick, I would definitely favor having a much more visual UI design inclined portfolio as opposed to a very word heavy portfolio. And the reason is having gone through some recruitment calls myself, I know that a lot of people don't really sit down and read all case studies. We really just tend to glance through many times. And so if you have very like concise writing and you have very good UI, it's much more likely that you're going to get a an invite than if you have like you went through all the process and then it takes us a while to see designs, and when we eventually see the designs they're not great. So yeah.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting point because um, as you know, I've also done some
Yeah.
recruiting, and to be honest, all the portfolios I get, I'm not sure what caused it because I've not really been active on Twitter in like the past year.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, a lot of influence goes through
Yeah.
Twitter to like the young product designers. I've just realized that people focus more on the
Mm.
writing. So most of the portfolios I get, even if it's Notion, personal websites, the structure usually goes like there's a there's like a
Yeah.
homepage with like a grid system of all the
Yeah.
products with like a picture of the product or like the final product, right? Maybe a screen from a dashboard or something, or like a mobile app. And I open it and I'm just seeing text, right? With the kind of day I have, I don't want to be sitting through all those
Yes.
texts. And then I have to scroll down and I go through, and then I now start to see, okay, this is wireframes. These are some of the personas that they went through. But before I get there, I have to sift through like a lot of text. And to be honest, you're right. People just glance
Yeah.
through and they don't really want to read all that. And to be honest, the people that I actually now read through. So maybe it's like a referral
Yeah.
from someone that I really respect. They're saying, "Oh, can you take a look at this guy a little bit more closely, see if you can hire
Yeah.
him?" And in a situation like that, I sort of have to pay more
Yeah.
attention to that portfolio, right? So when I read through, most of the time, it's still not as
Yeah.
impressive as I think it would be. So it feels like I wasted
Yeah.
my time, when the problem they are solving is not really a problem and their solution is not really a solution, but because they wrote it, it looks
Yeah.
nice. So it and I think that also takes away from other portfolios that I would review. So if I was a recruiter and I sift through someone's portfolio and I get disappointed, I'm not going to use that same energy to look at the other
Yeah.
portfolios. But but something that's always undefeated is like
Yeah.
images. Like just show me the process in
Yeah.
images that I can quickly glance through and sift through, and I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how the person did this. If you want to talk about the problem you're solving, write it in like four
Yeah.
lines or 5 lines, something I can
Yeah. Glance through.
quickly
Yeah.
read. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that there because what you said just really sparked that in my head.
Yeah, I think there was a time where designers were going very visual, and then there was a whole conversation of you need to write your process, and it's not about design and everything, and then we overcorrected to the point where we only write about process. And the truth is that now there are much more designers in the market, and so for every job there are much more applications, and if a recruiter is going to actually sit down and look at the portfolios, he doesn't spend, except something really catches his eye, he doesn't spend more than 10 minutes at most looking at a portfolio. So you want to get him interested or her interested very quickly. You want her to look at, like, get into your site, and she sees something nice, she sees another thing nice, and then she now says, okay, let me spend some more time. So I've seen two things that I think are very interesting. One, a lot of people are using motion and animation, which is good to
Mm,
stand
yeah.
out, and so that's really helpful. So because it immediately catches your eye. But more to documentation, I'm seeing some people are writing like very minimal content, very minimal copy, where they just say, this is, give you some context. So this was the problem, this is our process in a nutshell, and this is what the results were. This is why I did. This is the industry this product is in, and this is maybe the year I did it. Some people are going by route. And then another thing I've seen is that some people are doing, okay, so these are my designs, but then there's like a link or an accordion that says, if you want to see more about the process, click here. Do you get? So they're not putting it in your face directly and making you have to scroll through everything. So
Right.
that's probably the best route to go right now.
Yeah, I think that's really clever too. Okay, so since we're still on the topic of portfolios, in your opinion, how many projects do you think someone should put on their portfolio?
I usually tell people that you should have three major ones. So you should like go really deeply into three. Maybe one should be like a web app, and maybe another a mobile app, and then the other can be web or mobile, whichever way you want to go. And then beyond those three, you should have UI shots. So you want to have like three ones where you are drilling in and saying, okay, I can really, really do this thing. And you're showing us the different screens, or you're writing about, or showing us your process in tree. And I don't think like anybody really sits down and reads more than three. Anybody recruiting really sits down and reads more than three projects at a go. But then you also want to have UI shots, which is something that I've seen a lot of people do, and I think it's really nice. Is you want us to also see is essentially your dribble. So you want us to also see, okay, beyond doing this, I can also do all these other things. So when I speak to junior designers these days, and when I advise people about portfolios, that's usually how I direct them. Have three major ones, and then have a lot of UI shots.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, man. Thanks. So, next question. What are some common mistakes or pitfalls that aspiring product designers should be aware of, and how can they avoid them? So, also feel free to talk about it in like first
Mm,
person. So, if you've also made some of those mistakes in the past, you can personalize
okay.
it also.
Um. So I think one that I've seen a lot of junior designers do these days is posture. Um. And I don't know whether it's such a good thing. So there's a and this would be as if someone I'm ganging against like junior designers, but there's a very thin line between like faking it till you make it and just posturing. And the problem with it is that much more senior designers can smell it out. So you want to have a good balance of confidence, but you also want to be honest with, this is where I am, in my um, career, for multiple reasons. One,
Mm,
it kind of makes um, job placement easier, because I've had instances where I was asked to recommend for a more junior role, and I reached out to someone who I could see that, okay, this person was good at design, but they had made it clever. I'm still starting out. I'm looking for my first role and all that. And then I've had people who I thought were like much more mid level and senior just because of how they positioned themselves on social media and reach out to me about the same role. Now, that's not a bad thing, but what I'm just saying is because of just how they were positioned, they weren't coming to my mind at all for referrals. So that is
Mm,
it's very weird. The flip side of that is if you position as a senior, you might get more senior roles, and that's always a good thing because you learn on the job. There are two sides to it. Um, I think another thing is that I had to learn was just realizing that you don't know all the answers and it's fine. Especially when you start at a new company, for some people, because not to generalize, there is, and this was also for me when started out at the very beginning, was I wanted to be like I knew everything. I knew all the UX processes and everything. And then with time, I learned that it's actually okay to go and Google it or to ask another designer on the team or to talk to the PM and not so your job is not to know all the answers. Your job is to ask questions. And you can't really solve for what you don't have context on. So that's definitely a skill that I advise every designer to build is just curiosity and just your ability to embrace ambiguity. Um, another mistake. What's another mistake? So on one side, I want to say it's a mistake, but on the other side, it can be an asset. So it also depends. Is not finding a niche. So and like I said, it also depends. Um, when designers are much more established, it's much easier for them to pick up more hobbies. So right now, I know a lot of product designers are illustrating or learning iconography,
mm,
learning motion design, and I think that's the good time to do it, as opposed to when you're just starting out. On one side, it's people like a generalist, and there is a place for generalists in a lot of companies. On the other side, if I was hiring for a product design role, I probably would want someone that has much a deeper, a more depth in product design than someone that has like a little bit of experience with product design and motion design and graphics and branding. So
mm.
it depends. If you flip that around, I would imagine that someone that's hiring for a design agency might appreciate somebody that has a lot more of a generalist experience to someone that just has only product experience. So there are two sides to that coin. But yeah, those are the only ones that come to mind right now.
Yeah, that, that makes a lot of sense, man. Especially that final point. It could be a mistake
Yeah,
or an asset, and depending on whichever
yeah,
one you are, if you are more like a niche designer person or you're more of a generalist, there is a
yeah,
place for you. So like you said, an agency would probably value a generalist more because they can use the person for more
yeah,
jobs, more projects. But if you are thinking of joining a more structured team where they are going to have UX researchers, UI designers,
yeah,
interaction designers, they have roles for every
yeah,
specific thing, then it would make a lot more sense to position yourself into a
yeah.
specific niche. People would find
Easier.
you
Yeah,
more easier. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we're going to take like a short detour. Then I'm going to ask the burning question in everyone's minds, like if you could start again, how would you
Okay.
go about it? What would you do differently? Things like that. So I'm going to ask you some quick
Yeah.
fire questions so that the audience can get to know you a bit better. So it's going to be like a this or
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
questions. Are you an iPhone or an Android person?
These days, iPhone. I used to be an Android, but these days iPhone.
What changed?
What changed? I don't know. iOS just has more around privacy. Yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah,
true,
that's probably it.
true. Okay, dark mode or light mode?
Dark mode.
Always. Are you a
Always.
morning or a night person?
I'm a night person. I'm terrible
Of
in the
course.
mornings.
Yeah, the mornings are the worst. I don't know how people do it.
Yeah.
What is your favorite music genre?
That's my this or that question.
Yeah, still.
Uh, so I want to say that it is like rap or rock, but according to my Spotify Wrapped, is sad boy. So sad boy music. Um,
Love it.
so
Love it. Stay at home and chill or go out and hang out with friends.
it depends on the day.
Okay. Marvel or DC?
Or DC, any day, anytime. DC.
Why? Why
This
DC?
that's a whole other podcast episode.
Ah, okay. Maybe we'll schedule it.
That's a that's a whole episode.
Interesting. My last conversation on this podcast was also a DC guy.
Mm.
And I'm like, I thought there were more Marvel guys out
No,
there, but anyway.
yeah, there are
uh,
more Marvel guys, but Marvel fans are very shallow. Like you talk to a lot of the Marvel fans and they never read the comics, they just know MCU. DC fans are
oh
DC
yeah,
fans are
yeah,
real.
yeah.
Like we read the comics, we follow James Gunn's tweets. We are like we and not just now. We've read everything from Adam Ross to Jim Lee to Scott Snyder. I mean, I dare the average Marvel fan to name three Marvel comic book writers. so so
Okay, so who's your favorite superhero from DC?
Batman, without a doubt, Batman.
Interesting trend. Last guy also said Batman.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
He pulls
Messi or
higher
Ronaldo?
than Messi or Ronaldo. Messi.
That's cool. Yeah, you were saying something about Batman.
Yeah, so Batman pulls higher than Superman among DC fans.
Yeah.
He's the best superhero as at the last DC votes, and Superman is second. So
Who's your favorite Robin though?
my favorite Robin is that's a good question. Dick Grayson, then Damian Wayne. The rest of them are very forgettable. So Jason Todd, Tim Drake, um, yeah, oh, and what's his name? Fox's son, Luke Fox. They're all like very, very forgettable.
That would have been my exact answer. Okay, let's go back to the real
Yeah.
topic. If you could go back in time and start your product design learning journey from
Mm.
scratch, how would you go about it?
Hmm. So back in time, like back to 2019.
Yeah.
Okay, so if back to 2019, I think I'll probably start the same way. So like I said in the beginning, I'm happy I had a graphics design background because that kind of gave me a good foundation, and I am also happy that I went the route of doing like a course because that gave me structure to my learning. So that's very good. Um, Another thing that I'm happy I did, even though like now it will probably sound like a weird advice to give a designer, is I'm happy that I took an internship role that paid me very little, um, but put me like working with like real tech companies. Because I had freelanced, but being in a company and having that 9 to 5 and having it on your CV, that kind of set me up to, by the time I was moving to my next company, to be qualified to be an experienced hire, as opposed
Mm.
to having entered as a freelancer. Um, so that's also something that I'm happy I did. Um, I think I think um, one thing I probably would have done differently, and it's still something that's hard for me because I'm not very public in that sense, is I probably would have taken like my social media presence and personal branding a bit more seriously, if I started it again, because having a following is always a good thing. So you move away from outbound, especially if you want to freelance or if you want to speak or if you want to do a lot of those opportunities. It's much easier to have inbound opportunities where people are reaching out to you if you are very visible, if you have a public brand. Um, so that's probably something I would have done more. I mean, even the extent to which I did it, I know that it had to take a lot of convincing and having other designers talk to me that you can't be selling clothes inside your house. Nobody will know you're selling clothes. You have to go outside. Um, so that's probably something I would have done a lot more. Um, I think maybe another thing, just if I looking at it going back in time, would be probably would have applied to international roles much earlier. So um, around 2021, 2022, beginning of 2022, there was a really sweet spot where there was a lot of money in the ecosystem. It was an employees market. Designers were getting jobs all over the world. Designers were switching jobs every. So I heard of a designer that switched job in 2 months because the offers were coming from everywhere. And the reality is that right now that kind of has changed, not just because of like how investments have kind of gone, some of the startup investments went bad and that contributed to the layoff in the tech ecosystem, but just beyond that, that the world is going through a lot of changes right now. We're fighting two wars. um, Interest rate is much better in America, so there isn't as much startup funding, because it makes sense to just keep your money in the bank for investors.
Mm.
So that probably would have been something I would have done much earlier, is apply to a remote company, gotten much more years of experience working for an international company. Yeah. Mm.
Okay. Are there any other things you could have done differently?
So,
Or you're still thinking?
and I think another thing that I'm happy I did was join a community. I joined design communities very early on, and so that did two things. One, it put me in, just being around other designers. You learn a lot by proxy. So just by hearing people talk about things and color and how they approach projects and how they approach pricing and all these kind of things, you just learn by just soaking in the information and being around people. And the other thing that does is that you build friends very organically. So as opposed to meeting a random person on Twitter and texting them and be like, "Hey, I want to be your friend," or "I want you to be my mentor," which is not terrible, but it's slightly harder for people who are more that lean more to the introverted side. If you're in a community and you're gisting with people and everything, it's much more easier to build rapport and carry that beyond just the group chat. So that's another thing I'm happy I did. Um, as far as company moving goes, I think I've been pretty lucky. Now, people that and it's two. You can think of it in two ways. Some people that know me would say I've made some very weird company moving choices. Um, on the other side, every single company I've gone to has given me a platform that I probably wouldn't have had if I wasn't working there. So whether that was Venture Garden, where I got to work with a lot of like early stage startups or Fair Money, where I was designing for 3 million plus people, or then to where like I got to fly to Abuja and do like federal projects and all this kind of thing. So I think every I've been pretty lucky on that side where every job I've gone to kind of gave me a platform. Um, I think another thing I would do differently, and it's something I've learned to do now, is just there's this thing I say now, and I can't remember who I heard say it on Twitter, is um, consistency as opposed to intensity and burnout, because that's kind of how I've always worked. I have like I get very into it and I go really hard and then I burn out and then it takes a while to recover and then so I've learned now to be much more consistent, slightly less intense. But the benefit of being slightly less intense is that I'm able to be s- consistent sustainably. So I can put out a good output of work every single day because when it is close of work, I close my laptop and do other things. As opposed to working till 10 p.m. or working till 11 p.m. and then you do that for a month and then after that your brain is just so tired of Figma. So yeah, so that's probably another thing I've learned.
Nice, nice, nice. Wow. So, amongst all these things, how do you stay motivated and inspired?
Um
Since 2019.
Yeah. So it goes and comes. That's the truth. Some days I'm like, oh yeah, design can change the world and everything. And then there are other days where I'm like, I want to run and go and open farm. Um, so but what I'm doing these days is I'm finding out that when I read and I try to read a lot of design and product and marketing books, is found that when I read, it kind of opens me to like new ideas and kind of sparks up the creativity again. Another thing I'm always doing is I'm constantly watching talks, whether that is tech podcasts or design talks or product talks. Just hearing other people that are really excited about it talk about it, it kind of builds more excitement. And I think
Mm.
another thing that I know I've done and that's really helped is that I'm just constantly searching for inspiration. So whether that is whether that is on Dribble or Behance or Arena or reading Medium articles or smashing magazine, um, all that information helps do two things. One is it keeps you motivated and you're up to date on what's happening. But the other thing that it does is that when you need to design or when you need to approach a problem or think through an experience, your brain has a lot of things that it can pull from. And then just finally another thing I'm learning to do, which I just spoke about, is I'm learning to detach and not tie my personality to product design.
Oh, how do you mean?
So I mean, there's a way that, and I think mm, a- because design is such a personal thing. Every designer kind of has a flavor. Every kind of has a style. Um, you, thinking through problems creatively means that the way that you will think through it is very different from the way that I will think through it because we have very different creative inputs, and so it can get very personal. And what that also means is that we can it's very easy to tie your identity to your work. I am a product designer and product designer is who I am. um,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
so learning to detach from that I am a product designer and I love it and I design and I think design can change the world. But that's only one part of Kola. And like Kola also likes to go to the gym or listen to music or cook or DJ or do something else. I think that definitely is something that allows me to come back and design every day. I think that if, and this is from personal experience also, the days that I have been only focused on, I'm doing a course on design and designing as a side project and designing for practice and only tweeting about design and only talking in design communities. If you do that for like a period of 2 or 3 months, you kind of become jaded and burnt out. And so having other things that you're doing in your life, as even if it's just hanging out with friends or playing with your dogs, um, that kind of allows you come back the next day and open your screen with a fresh mind.
Yeah, that's that's a very healthy way of looking at things, to be honest. Okay, so that's the final question I
Duh, duh, duh,
have.
duh, duh.
Um, yeah, we've
Yeah,
tried. So let me go through some of the action points that I wrote down.
nice.
Yeah, so you mentioned a lot of designers learn from like YouTube, but that gives them fragmented knowledge. They don't know like what to do
Yeah,
next. They sort of have to figure it out by
yeah,
themselves, but they don't have to. They can take a more structured
yeah,
course, and some a very good one that you recommend is Interaction Design Foundation. And essential skills that you think people should learn, some of the fundamentals: color, type, and layout, because most design or visual elements are made up of those
yeah,
things, so it's very important for them to learn those basics. Every product designer should understand what design thinking
yeah,
is and how to make good use of it. And they should learn basics of research. Then you also recommended some courses like becoming a UX designer from scratch. We don't know if that's still on IDF,
yeah.
but you can find like a
Yeah,
similar
and
course. You
and
can check.
beyond that, I think like there are also like a lot of Nigerian companies that are doing pretty good courses these days, like Alt School and Tredford. At least those two. So all school,
Hmm.
Tredford and Stuten. I think those three are I can
Yeah.
kind of like with my whole heart I can recommend those three. So
Okay, cool. You also mentioned NNG, Nelson Norman
yeah,
Group, where people can look at some of their writings to catch up on things and brush up on some of their knowledge. AJ and Smart, they have a YouTube channel. They talk a lot about
yeah,
workshops and design
yeah.
sprints.
So that's a bit more mid-level. So for
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, probably more mid-level designers that will be running their own workshops and organizing their own
Yeah,
sprints. So that can be helpful
yeah.
also.
I mean, it's a very helpful thing to do when you are within an
Yeah,
organization or maybe an agency, and you want people to start seeing you as a leader,
yeah,
because most of the time before you get that leadership role, you have to have started doing
yeah,
leadership
yeah,
things, right? So doing workshops and all these things, and facilitating meetings and sprints is a huge help. So AJ and Smart, you guys can people can check it out. Portfolio building, you mentioned. I know we talked at length about how people should use more imagery of their work and minimal copy, like writing. And people use motion to stand out, so that's also always a good idea. But don't overload people's
yeah, yeah,
senses,
yeah,
you know. And we also talked about how many projects people should put in their portfolio. You said maybe three major projects and a lot of UI
Yeah.
shots, because UI shots are very, very important for people to understand your style of designing and if you can fit into their
Yeah.
team. Then we talked about common mistakes, poor positioning, where people are not really honest about where they are.
Yeah. So
Um,
it could either go
what?
both ways. So it's either you position yourself, you posture too high, and then like people are not reaching out to you for roles that you need, or you posture too low, or you don't position yourself at all, and then more
Yeah,
senior roles
yeah,
which you can take on, people can't see you to offer it to you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, one other thing you said is fine to not know all the answers. This is something I've been preaching for a long
Yeah.
time. People that have worked with me, I'm always preaching it. It's fine not to know all the answers. And there's one quote that should be posted on people's walls. You should have the ability to embrace
Yeah.
ambiguity. I think that's very wholesome. And we also talked about niching down or being a generalist. And then we talked about starting over. You're happy you took an internship
Yeah.
job, which taught you how to be in an organizational setting and joining
Yeah.
communities and soaking up all that information, to also build your social skills. And one thing you could have done differently is take social media a lot more
Yeah.
seriously. I think we need like a master
We need,
class
yeah,
on
we
that
need
thing.
we need like we need one of the like Moodia or Denry or someone to come and teach us a
Yeah,
course on how to
I'm going
do
to drag
socials,
Darren one of these
how to do
days.
social media.
Yeah, it just comes so
Yeah.
naturally to her. Not applying for international roles earlier. Yeah, consistency as opposed to intensity,
Mm.
and then burnout. I think that's very important also.
Yeah.
And to stay motivated, you talked about listening to tech, design, and product talks, reading a lot, and constantly searching for inspiration, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've gone through a lot
Yeah.
of points, man. This has
Yeah.
been this has been great. So where can
We also
people reach out
mentioned
to
we
you?
also mentioned Batman. You don't want to forget Batman. So
Yeah, very, very
yeah.
important, man. Batman, Dick Grayson, and Damian Wayne. Yeah, so where can people reach out to you
So
if they want to, ask questions and just say hi?
so if you want to say hi and see me not talk about design, and just basically see me as when I'm trolling my friends, then Twitter, um, Kola Ojo on Twitter. But if you want to ask like a much more serious thing, or maybe book a mentorship call, I do free mentorship calls on ADP list. So you could just search me on ADP list, Kola Ojo, and I should come up, and then you can book a free mentorship call. Um, or you could just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I probably use too much LinkedIn for my age. So yeah.
Okay, okay, that's awesome. So wrapping up, um I'm just going to talk a bit about what is powering this
Yeah.
podcast. So this podcast is powered by Dula Studio. Dula Studio is essentially a strategic partner for rapid growing companies in need of product guidance and scalable design systems. So check us out at www.dula.studio. If you want to share feedback on this podcast or submit future episode ideas, you can connect with us at Dula_studio on all social media platforms. So that's DULA_studio. And if you want to say hi to me personally, you can hit me up at Walide on all social media platforms, or Walide underscore. I think I'm Walide underscore on Twitter, and Lady Adeni on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. Caller, see you on Sunday after
Yeah. Thanks for having
church.
me, man.
if you're going to church. All right, man.
All right, now. Cheers.
Yeah, so have a great day and peace
Yeah,
out.
cheers.
Can you see my screen? Kola, you there? Can you see my screen? Have you turned off your video?
No, my video is on right now.
Okay, stopping the recording.